What if the truth about Princess Diana, the People's Princess, was never fully told? What if, hidden behind palace walls and polished statements, there lay a story so deeply buried it could change everything we thought we knew about her and her sons? Tonight we revisit the heart of a woman who dared to love beyond royal rules, a secret affair, a forbidden child, and decades later, Prince William's quiet discovery that would shatter the image of the perfect royal fairy tale. This isn't tabloid gossip. This is the story they buried, and the secret the next generation could no longer ignore. If you've ever admired Diana's courage, or wondered what truth the palace never wanted us to know, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who remembers her grace. Every click helps us uncover more hidden stories of love, loss, and legacy within the royal family. Now, let's begin with what they never wanted revealed. They called her the People's Princess, but few ever truly knew the woman behind that crown. Before the flashing cameras and the royal vows, Diana Spencer was just a young girl who dreamed of being loved, not by a prince, but by someone who saw her. From the moment she stepped into royal life, she realized something painful. Fairy tales sound beautiful, until you're the one living inside the glass castle. The marble floors were cold, the silence endless, and the expectations heavier than any crown she would ever wear. Every smile she gave the cameras, every tilt of her head, all carefully studied, polished, practiced. But behind that grace lived a woman aching for warmth, for the kind of love that didn't come with a rulebook. And then, it happened. It started quietly, as it always does, in a moment of human kindness. A man who wasn't supposed to matter in the royal circle. A man who treated her not as your royal highness, but simply as Diana. He listened. He laughed. He looked at her the way no one had in years. That single act of being seen, not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a woman, changed everything. You can almost imagine it. Late evenings in Kensington Palace, her laughter echoing down marble halls once cold with silence. Letters exchanged in careful handwriting, folded and hidden beneath books or tucked into flower vases. Their secret language of love. But love for Diana was never simple. In the royal world, emotions came with consequences. Every step she took was shadowed by cameras. Every whisper carried through corridors. The palace, they say, has walls that listen, and those walls began to whisper. The staff noticed her change. Her smiles were different, her mood lighter. Some said they caught glimpses of a man slipping through the back gardens at twilight. Others claimed they saw her humming softly while writing notes late at night. Diana once said, "I wear my heart on my sleeve." And perhaps that was her greatest strength, and her deepest curse. Because in a place built on secrets, honesty became her rebellion. Her love was pure, but it was dangerous. He wasn't a prince, nor a diplomat, nor anyone the palace would approve of. He was real. And that for the royal institution was a problem. The monarchy runs on image, perfection sculpted from control. And Diana's growing independence was beginning to look like a threat. She was becoming larger than the crown itself. Loved not for what she represented, but for who she was. And behind closed doors that frightened people. Oh, they began to interfere. The calls stopped connecting. Letters went missing. Even her closest friends noticed the tension. She was being watched more closely, guarded more tightly, her schedule suddenly adjusted. But love doesn't vanish on command. Sometimes it hides, deep within quiet moments no one can erase. There's a story told by one of her confidants that Diana once visited a small countryside hospital under a charitable pretense, but it wasn't a just charity that took her there. It was him, a doctor, compassionate, grounded. Someone who reminded her of the world outside Buckingham Palace gates. He saw beyond the image into the person beneath. And that, for Diana, meant more than any title could offer. Some say this was the man who truly held her heart. Others claim he was simply a chapter in her long search for real love. But one thing's certain. Around him, Diana seemed alive again. In private diaries later shared by friends, she wrote of feeling free for the first time, describing long walks, stolen moments, and the dream of a life unchained from royal duties. A cottage, a simple life, no press, no pressure, just peace.
Imagine that, the most photographed woman in the world dreaming of anonymity. It's almost poetic, isn't it? But fate had other plans. The more she pulled toward freedom, the more the establishment tightened its grip. Every decision she made was scrutinized, every outing questioned. And somewhere, between love and duty, Diana found herself torn apart. She once told a friend, "I know they can't control love, but they can destroy the people who try to live it." Those words would haunt her story forever, because what came next would change everything. Rumors began to swirl, not just about an affair, but about something far deeper, something that could never be allowed to surface. The palace wanted silence. Diana wanted truth. And that truth, her truth, was about to take on a life of its own. But before that, there was one final, tender moment. A late-night drive through London. Rain against the car windows. Her hand resting on his. No word spoken. Just that shared look, the quiet understanding that they could never truly be together. He told her to be careful. She smiled through tears and whispered, "They can take everything from me, but not what I feel." The car disappeared into the misty streets, and with it, the last glimpse of the happiness she had fought so hard to find. The next morning, she returned to her royal duties, cameras flashing, crowds cheering. No one could see the ache behind her eyes. And yet, something about Diana's spirit changed forever after that night. She had tasted real love, and she could never again pretend that the royal life was enough. That love, though buried in secrecy, would echo for years, because hidden in that quiet relationship was a spark of something the world would later uncover, something William himself would one day stumble upon, setting off a chain of discoveries no one in the palace could stop. But for now, Diana kept her secret locked behind her graceful smile, waiting for the right moment, or the right person. To find it, they say truth never really dies, it just waits to be found. And for Princess Diana, some truths were so fragile, so dangerous, that they had to be hidden even from the people closest to her. After her secret love faded into the shadows, Diana's world changed again. The tabloids thought she was just another lonely royal searching for attention. But behind the flashes and the chaos, something far more personal was unfolding, something the palace worked hard to silence. It began with a letter, written in Diana's unmistakable handwriting, soft, looping, emotional. It was found years later by a close friend who claimed it was too personal to ever publish. In it, Diana hinted at something life-changing that had been taken from her. She wrote about a tiny soul that was never given a chance. Was it a metaphor, or was it a confession? To this day, no one knows for certain, but what followed next deepened the mystery. One nurse, who had once worked at a private medical facility visited by Diana under a false name, later recalled strange events. A high-profile woman, she said, had been admitted for tests in absolute secrecy. Security was unusual. Paperwork vanished overnight. And every nurse who was there that night was made to sign an additional confidentiality clause, stricter than any before. Years later, when the woman was shown a photograph of Diana, her face went pale. "I can't say anything," she whispered. And she never did again. For decades, conspiracy theories swirled. But behind all the noise, there was one undeniable fact. Diana herself believed she was being watched, recorded, and controlled. She told friends, "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident." She said it more than once. Now, imagine being a woman so loved by the public, yet so distrusted by her own circle. A woman whose private letters were copied, whose car was followed, and whose attempt to live freely was seen as rebellion. It said she confided to her personal bodyguard about a child that couldn't be acknowledged. The bodyguard, later dismissed under mysterious circumstances, refused to discuss her words in public. But he did say one thing. She carried a secret that could destroy more than one life. Could that secret have been about a child? Someone the palace couldn't allow to exist? Someone who would stand outside royal bloodlines, yet carry a royal heart? Many have wondered if Diana's affection for children, her deep, natural bond with the innocent, came from more than empathy. She visited orphanages, cradled babies others ignored, and spoke about motherhood with a wistful tenderness that sometimes sounded like mourning. "I wanted to be the mother I never had," she once said softly. "But sometimes love gets taken from you before it begins." Years after her passing, whispers of a hidden birth began to resurface. Documents allegedly linked to a private clinic in 1983 went missing from government archives. One investigative journalist, who pursued the lead for nearly a decade, disappeared under suspicious circumstances. When his notes were found, one page stood out, written in pencil. "Kensington. Night visit. Child never registered." It was enough to stir imaginations around the world. But was there truth beneath the myth? Royal insiders denied everything. They always do. Yet among Diana's personal effects, the ones returned to William and Harry after her death, was a small envelope marked only with her initials and a date that didn't match any known event in her public calendar. Inside that envelope was a single photograph, too faded to be certain, of Diana holding a baby. The child's face was partially obscured. No name, no note, just silence. Experts who examined the photo couldn't verify when or where it was taken. But one curious detail stood out. The wallpaper in the background belonged to a private estate Diana had visited briefly, the same one where her secret love once worked. Coincidence? Maybe. But Diana didn't believe in coincidences. She once told a journalist during her famous BBC interview, "There are 3 of us in this marriage." What if there were 4? Even Prince William, years later, would comment privately, according to one close aide, that his mother's private life held things she was never allowed to explain. And when he finally began exploring her stored belongings as an adult, it was said he found something that changed how he saw everything. A clue, a letter, a secret buried in plain sight. Could this have been the hidden child Diana once mourned, or something else entirely? Those close to the late princess recall her speaking often about starting anew, living abroad, escaping the crown, raising her boys, and perhaps one more. One more. That phrase appears again in her diary entries. Perhaps one more. The idea that Diana could have conceived a child outside her marriage isn't only tabloid fantasy. It's been whispered by people who worked within palace walls. They knew something happened, but no one dared to speak. Some even claimed that after her separation from Charles, she had confided that someone very young would one day come looking for her, and when that happened, William will understand. The phrase puzzled everyone, until years later, when William discovered the letter. But that is for the next chapter, because before William ever found the truth, it had already been buried, under official records, lost testimony, and the iron silence of an institution that feared what one secret could do to a dynasty built on image. And perhaps that's why Diana was called dangerous. Not because she was reckless, but because she was real, because she carried something, or someone, they couldn't control. In the end, the truth of that hidden child may never be proven. But what if proof was never the point? What if Diana's silence was a way of protecting an innocent life from the machine that once consumed her? It's a haunting thought, isn't it? A princess, fighting alone, keeping a secret that could rewrite royal history, and dying before the world could ever know the truth. And yet, truth is a strange way of finding its way home to it was never supposed to happen. No one expected the heir to the throne, Prince William, to find the one thing his mother had hidden from the world. But fate, it seems, has a way of guiding hearts back to the truth. It was a quiet night at Kensington Palace. The world outside slept, London streets humming softly under the glow of the street lamps. Inside, William sat surrounded by boxes, old files, sealed envelopes, photographs. He was going through his mother's personal belongings, items returned to him years after her death. Most of it was familiar, handwritten notes, jewelry, a few of her favorite books. But one box stood out. It was smaller, unmarked. Inside, wrapped in aged tissue paper, was an envelope addressed in Diana's graceful handwriting. For William, when you are ready. He froze. His hands trembled as he turned it over. The seal was old, but intact, untouched for decades. No one had ever told him this existed. He hesitated, staring at the words as if they were alive. When you are ready. Was he ready now? Slowly, he broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph. The photo, faded, worn by time, showed a young Diana, smiling softly, cradling a baby. The child's face was partly hidden, turned toward her shoulder. But it wasn't William. It wasn't Harry. For a moment, the air left the room. William blinked, his heart pounding. Who was this child? He looked at the letter next. The paper yellowed, the ink smudged in places where tears might have fallen. My darling boy, it began, if you're reading this, I am gone. But there's something you must know, not because it changes who we are, but because truth should never die with silence. Her words were gentle, almost trembling. Once, I loved someone deeply. It wasn't planned. It wasn't royal. But it was real. For a time, I thought we might have a life together, far from the noise, far from the eyes that judge. But love, when it crosses royal lines, becomes dangerous. I was made to give up more than I ever thought I could. William stopped reading, pressing his fingers to his eyes. He could hear her voice in the words. So honest, so human. He read on. You and Harry are my greatest joys. But there was once another, a child who didn't get the chance to live the life I dreamed for them. I kept this photo because I needed to remember that even in loss, love survives. The words struck like lightning, a confession, a sorrow, a story no one had ever told. William's breath caught. Could it be true? Had his mother carried a secret so immense, so heartbreaking, that she could never share it, not even with a world that adored her? He sat there for a long time, staring at the photo, tracing her handwriting with his thumb. Memories of her flooded back, her laughter, her warmth, her words about honesty and love. Suddenly, those memories began to feel different. Certain moments made sense now. The night she would tuck him in and whisper, "Always follow your heart, even when they tell you not to." The time she looked at him as if she were preparing him for something deeper, something she couldn't say out loud. He realized then that this letter wasn't meant to burden him. It was meant to set him free. Still, the question lingered. Who was the child? Was it real? Was the story hidden in that photograph more than a metaphor for lost love? William didn't know, but he needed to. He quietly began searching. Not through the palace archives. Those were controlled and monitored. But through private connections, people his mother had trusted. Old friends, former staff, journalists she once confided in. Each inquiry brought him whispers, but no answers. One elderly woman, who had once been part of Diana's personal medical circle, told him, "Your mother was the bravest woman I ever met. She carried her secrets not out of shame, but out of love." Another hinted that certain record from a clinic Diana had visited was sealed under royal order, never to be released. The more he learned, the heavier the truth became. If the story was true, if there had been another child, that meant his family had buried not just evidence, but a life. And yet, what would happen if he exposed it? Would it bring peace to his mother's memory, or chaos to the crown he was destined to inherit? He couldn't sleep that night. He walked through the palace halls, haunted by the silence. He imagined her, walking these same halls, carrying that same ache, knowing she could never speak freely. He whispered to the darkness, "Mum, what do you want me to do?" And maybe, just maybe, he felt her there, the faint sense of warmth, like the touch of a hand on his shoulder. The next morning, William sealed the photo and letter in a new envelope. He wrote on it in his own handwriting, to be kept safe, always. He didn't tell Harry. Not yet. He didn't tell anyone. But those who worked closely with him noticed something change in him after that day. He became more reflective, more protective of his family, more determined to live by the values his mother had died for. And when he later told Kate, quietly, in confidence, she was said to have cried, not from scandal, but from sorrow, because she understood what it meant to carry a love the world would never fully understand. William never spoke publicly about the letter, but in private moments, those who know him best say he sometimes pauses when asked about Diana's legacy. He'll smile, look down for a moment, and simply say, "There was more to her story than anyone will ever know." Maybe that's all we need to hear. Maybe the rest was never meant for us. But what if, just what if, that letter wasn't the only thing he found? What if Diana left behind more clues, more evidence of a love story buried deeper than we can imagine? Because as one royal aide once whispered, William didn't just find a letter. He found a reason to protect her memory from those who still want it forgotten. And that leads us to the legacy the world almost lost forever. Time is a strange thing. It blurs pain, but it never fully buries truth. And in the years since Diana's passing, that truth, the one whispered behind royal curtains, has continued to breathe quietly through those she left behind. For Prince William, the discovery of his mother's letter changed everything. Not his love for the crown, but his understanding of what it costs. He realized that the monarchy isn't just a symbol. It's a cage made of gold, built on silence, duty, and sacrifice. And Diana had paid the highest price. But even from beyond the grave, her spirit wouldn't allow itself to be erased. It lived in the people who carried her memory, in every nurse she comforted, every child she hugged, every person who felt seen by her kindness. Her legacy wasn't marble or gold. It was humanity. In public, William remained composed, graceful, diplomatic, royal. But in private, those who know him say there were nights he would sit by the window, staring at the stars, whispering to the one person he still wished could answer back. He often told friends that his mother's greatest lesson wasn't about fame or power. It was about truth. That sometimes you can't change what people believe, but you can live in a way that honors what's right. Still, that letter, and what it implied, weighed on him. He couldn't ignore the thought that somewhere, beyond all the noise, there might be another life connected to his mother's story. He couldn't prove it. He didn't even know if he wanted to. But he promised himself something quietly that night. If the truth ever surfaced, he would not hide it. And perhaps that's why, as he grew into his role as a father and a future king, William's way of leading began to feel different, more open, more human. He chose love on his own terms, not through arrangement, not through royal decree. Catherine wasn't chosen by tradition. She was chosen by heart. And maybe, just maybe, that was Diana's final gift, a reminder to her son that love, real love, is worth breaking the rules for. In a way, William's marriage became the redemption of Diana's story. Where her love had been silenced, his was celebrated. Where her truth was buried, his honesty became his strength. It's poetic, isn't it? The mother who couldn't live freely gave birth to a son who could. But there's another layer, one that the public rarely sees. A few years ago, in a private speech at an event honoring his mother's charities, William paused before the audience and said, "My mother taught me that truth is not always comfortable, but it's always right." Most people heard it as a tribute, but those who knew about the letter, the few trusted souls in his circle, understood that it was something more. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a nod to the secret he still keeps close, not out of fear, but out of love. Because William knows what his mother endured, the manipulation, the monitoring, the loneliness behind the royal facade. He's seen how history can twist a woman's heart into a headline, and he refuses to let it happen again. That's why he protects his family so fiercely, why he guards Catherine and their children from the same kind of intrusion that once destroyed Diana's peace. Every photograph we see of him today, the calm smile, the tender glance at Kate, is a silent tribute to a woman who taught him that real power doesn't come from titles, but from love. Still, some truths never rest. Even now, there are researchers, journalists, and insiders who quietly chase the story of Diana's hidden child. Some say the truth will emerge one day, that DNA, technology, or courage will bring it to light. Others believe William already knows more than is ever said, and that out of respect for his mother, his chosen silence. Either way, her spirit lives on, not as a ghost haunting the palace, but as a presence, in the way her sons raise their children, in the compassion they show strangers, in the way they speak about love without shame. Because love was always Diana's rebellion, and truth, her unfinished legacy. Perhaps that's why people still light candles for her, still write letters, still cry when they hear her name. Because they sense it, that somewhere between myth and memory, there was a woman who dared to live honestly in a world that demanded perfection. Diana didn't need a crown to change history. Her power came from her heart, and that heart still beats quietly in every person who remembers her not as a princess, but as a mother, a woman, and a soul who tried to be free. As for William, he carries that truth like a torch. Not flaunted, not spoken aloud, just held, silently, reverently, like something too sacred for the world to twist again. Maybe one day he'll tell the full story. Maybe he won't. But either way, the world already knows what matters. That love, once given, never disappears. It lives on in the children it touched, in the hearts it healed, in the legacy that even time could not erase. And as long as there are people willing to remember Diana not as a tragedy, but as a truth, the truth they buried will never truly stay buried. Because some stories don't belong to the crown. They belong to the people. And this was Hayes. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the woman Diana truly was, not the princess in the headlines, but the human being behind the smile, then don't let her truth fade away. White right pointing backhand index hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next hidden chapter of the royal story. Every time you share one of these videos, you help keep her voice alive, the voice of love, truth, and courage that refuse to be silenced. Tell me in the comments, what do you believe about Diana's hidden truth? Let's keep her legacy alive, together. Until next time, this is Royal Real Stories, where truth meets heart. Broken Heart Crown.